Greetings. Research into the prehistoric period of any people is always an attempt to assemble a complete picture from scattered fragments, where every shard, stone tool, or linguistic root becomes a key to understanding the past. In the case of the Sami, the indigenous people of Northern Europe, this task is complicated by several fundamental factors. First, the Sami left no written sources of their own before the Common Era. Their history of this period is entirely silent and is reconstructed exclusively by external observers or by methods of modern science. Second, the territory of their settlement, Sápmi, which covers the northern parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Kola Peninsula, is a region with extreme climatic conditions, where the preservation of organic materials is a rarity, and cultural layers are often mixed or destroyed by natural processes. The history of the Sami before the Common Era is not a linear path from point A to point B, but a complex process of ethnogenesis that included migrations, cultural and linguistic diffusion, changes and adaptation to the surrounding environment. Are you ready to walk this path with me? Well then, let's begin. Before diving into the history itself, it is necessary to understand how perceptions of the Sami past have changed. After all, the history of Sami studies is itself a mirror of the development of European science, where Romanticism and racial biology were replaced by social anthropology and post-colonial studies. Thus, at the beginning of the 20th century, when physical anthropology and craniometry were the dominant methods for determining ethnic affiliation, scientists faced the problem of Sami uniqueness. The Sami differed physically from neighboring Scandinavian and Finnish populations, which gave rise to hypotheses about their isolation. The Swedish linguist Carl Bernhard Wiklund, one of the most authoritative figures in lapology of that time, proposed a theory that tried to explain this uniqueness through the prism of the geology of the Ice Age. In his generalizing work La Parna, which translates as the Sami, Wiklund put forward the hibernation hypothesis. He assumed that during the last glacial maximum, when most of northern Europe was covered by a kilometer-thick layer of ice, the ancestors of the Sami did not migrate south like other European populations. Instead, according to Wiklund, they allegedly found refuge on a narrow strip of ice-free coast in northern Norway and the Kola Peninsula, where they survived in conditions of Arctic isolation for millennia. It was this prolonged isolation, in his opinion, that led to the formation of the unique anthropological type of the Sami, the so-called Lapinoid race, which differed from Scandinavians, Finns, and Siberian peoples. Wiklund called this hypothetical population Proto-Lapps. He believed that this prolonged isolation from the rest of humanity led to the formation not only of a specific anthropological type of the Sami, but also of their language, which in his opinion was not originally Finno-Ugric, but changed its structure under later influence. Wiklund tried to link these proto-Lapps with the archaeological Komsa culture, monuments of which were found on the coast of Finnmark, interpreting the crude stone tools of Komsa as proof of the antiquity of this culture that survived the glacier. When later, according to Wiklund's same theory, Finnish peoples came to them and brought the Finno-Ugric language, the descendants of the Komsa culture switched to it, but left in it a huge layer of incomprehensible words that have no relatives in any other language of the world. This, in his opinion, explained the uniqueness of Sami vocabulary related to nature and reindeer herding. Wiklund's idea was also supported by Gustav Hallström, who in his fundamental work, Monumental Art of Northern Europe from the Stone Age, Norwegian Locations, clearly distinguished two great traditions of Scandinavian rock art, hunter's art and farmer's art. He concluded that the northern art of hunters was created by Proto-Lapps. After all, the area of distribution of northern rock drawings almost ideally coincided with the historical territory of Sami settlement. Like Wiklund before him, Hallström believed that an isolated group of people, whom he attributed to the Komsa culture, survived the Ice Age on the coast of Norway. It was these people, in his opinion, who created the naturalistic depictions of moose and reindeer. Therefore, accordingly, the petroglyphs are proof of the autochthony of the Sami, that is, that they lived there since ancient times. And here let us note immediately that Wickland's theory was a product of its time and is today almost completely rejected by science. Geological studies have proven that during the glacial maximum, the coast of Finnmark was unsuitable for human life due to the severity of the climate and the ice sheet. Furthermore, genetic data refute complete isolation, pointing to complex migration flows. However, Wickland's theory is important as a starting point. It was the first to pose the question of Sami autochthony in the region, although it gave an erroneous answer to it. Parallel to Wickland's theory, there existed a migration approach, which often had a tinge of racial hierarchy. Thus, the theory of the Mongoloid origin of the Sami was dominant in European science throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. It was based on external features and false perceptions that all non-Indo-European peoples of Europe must be arrivals from Asia. The father of this theory, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, was the first to propose the division of humanity into 5 main varieties, based on the shape of the skull. Thus, he identified the Caucasian, Mongolian, Ethiopian, American, and Malay varieties. He classified the Sami as representatives of the Mongolian race, together with the Chinese and Eskimos. He described them as people having the same facial characteristics as the peoples of Central Asia, and who are an alien element in the north of Europe. The Swedish inventor of the cephalic index, Anders Retzius, also agreed with Blumenbach, and although he divided humanity into only 2 types, long-headed, dolichocephalic, and short-headed, brachycephalic, Retzius also considered the Sami related to Mongols and Finns, contrasting them with Scandinavians. In general, he considered the Sami, as well as the Basques, to be remnants of an ancient primitive race that lived in Europe before the arrival of Indo-Europeans. Swedish scientist Sven Nilsson went even further, refusing to believe that dwarves, trolls, and elves were simply a creation of folk fantasy. For Nilsson, these beings were not magical spirits, but real people, indigenous inhabitants of Scandinavia. He believed that before the arrival of Indo-Europeans, the lands of Scandinavia were inhabited by a pygmy race, Mongoloid tribes that were the ancestors of the Sami. The meeting of these 2 worlds was a shock. The newcomers did not understand the local inhabitants, feared their magic, and over time transformed them in folklore into underground creatures, dwarves, and trolls. Nielsen masterfully explained every fairy tale detail through Sami everyday life. Take, for example, the legend that dwarves live underground or inside rocks. The scientist pointed to traditional Sami dwellings, gamis. These were dugouts covered with turf and moss, which from afar looked like ordinary green hills or piles of stones. When a Germanic newcomer saw a person suddenly appear from such a hill, a myth was born in his consciousness about a creature emerging from the bowels of the earth. Even the appearance of fairy tale dwarves, small, wrinkled, ugly, Nilsson interpreted as a racist caricature. Tall Scandinavians looked down on the short-statured Sami, hyperbolizing their facial features and the traces of a hard life in the north into an image of ugly dwarves. And those same elf arrows, which peasants found in their fields for centuries and considered magical objects, were for Nielsen the final proof. He saw in them not magic, but real flint arrowheads, with which the Aborigines desperately tried to defend their land from the iron invasion of the newcomers. Thus, Sven Nilsson transformed the Sami from a people into a living prototype of mythical monsters, cementing their status as tragic exiles from their own land. As we can see, in the paradigm of the migration approach, the Sami were often viewed either as late arrivals from the east who displaced or assimilated the original population, or conversely, as degraded descendants of older cultures under the pressure of superior Germanic peoples. The turning point in understanding the early history of the region was the work of the Danish-Norwegian archaeologist Povel Simonsen. Having conducted large-scale excavations in the Varangerfjord in the 1950s and 60s, Simonsen revised the interpretation of the Komsa culture. Previously, the Komsa culture was considered an isolated phenomenon, as stated by Wickland. Simonsen, however, analyzing the typology of stone tools, demonstrated that Komsa was not a closed system. He discovered typological similarities between the Komsa inventory and other Mesolithic cultures, in particular the Fosna culture on the west coast of Norway, and even post-Swiderian cultures of Eastern Europe. So instead of looking for the moment of the Sami's arrival, Simonsen proposed viewing the history of the region as a process of gradual adaptation and evolution of the local population. According to his theory, the bearers of the Komsa culture were the distant physical ancestors of the Sami, although ethnically and linguistically, they were not yet Sami in the modern sense. He formulated the thesis: the Sami did not arrive, they arose here. And this became the foundation for the modern understanding of Sami autochthony. Before Simonsen, scientists often believed that every change in the shape of an arrowhead meant the arrival of a new people. Simonsen insisted, if we see new tools, it does not mean that new people have arrived. It means that the old inhabitants learned to make better things or adopted technologies from neighbors. If Blumenbach said, the Sami are Asian arrivals, and Wickland said that the Sami are isolated relics of the glacier, then Povel Simonsen said, the Sami are the descendants of the pioneers of this land. He legitimized the Sami as an indigenous people, proving that their history on this land had not been interrupted for 10,000 years, starting from the very first campfires of the Komsa culture. Modern science has not rejected Povel Simonsen's ideas, but has added an impressive example to them. While Simonsen proved that the history of the northern population was continuous, modern archaeologists and geneticists have found that the very beginning of this history was much more dramatic and complex than a simple advance to the north. The picture we see today resembles the movement of two giant streams that met at the edge of the world. The first stream moved as soon as the glacier began to retreat, revealing a harsh but life-rich coast. This was the Western Path, the route of maritime pioneers. People whose ancestors hunted on the plains of the now submerged Doggerland and northern Germany began to move rapidly along the Atlantic coast of Norway. These were the bearers of the so-called Arensbergian tradition, who followed seals and fish, leaving behind sites of the Fosna and early Komsa cultures. They brought with them simple crude tools made of quartz, adapted for survival on the seacoast. But at the same time, a completely different scenario was unfolding on the other side of Europe. This was the Eastern Path, the route of tundra hunters. From the territory of modern Poland and the Baltics, through the forests of Karelia and Finland, people from the Swiderian culture moved. They followed the reindeer, bypassing the ice sheet from the east. And they carried something unique with them, a technological signature that archaeologists call the pressure blade technique. This method of making thin, sharp, blade-like flakes was unknown to their Western contemporaries, and it was this marker that allowed scientists to track their path through the millennia. The culmination of this prehistoric odyssey occurred in the extreme north, in Finnmark. It was here, on the roof of Europe, that these two waves, the Western maritime and the Eastern continental, met, contrary to old theories about wars and displacement. Modern data indicate that this was a meeting that led to a merger. Archaeologists find sites of the late Komsa culture where crude Western quartz sits alongside refined Eastern slate knives. Genetics put the final period in this history, confirming Simonsen's correctness about local roots. Ancient DNA from Scandinavian hunters showed that they were the direct result of the mixing of Western and Eastern European populations. Thus, the ancestors of the Sami were not simply migrants who came to an empty place. They became the result of a unique fusion of two different worlds, which took place precisely there, in Scandinavia. So Simonsen was right. The Sami truly are an indigenous people, as their ethnogenesis as a unique group began precisely at the moment of this great meeting of West and East. The continued formation of the Proto-Sami community takes place in the Neolithic, along with the spread of certain types of pottery. Thus, approximately from 4200 BC, the pitted comb ware culture spreads in Fennoscandia. This tradition has a clear Eastern origin, and most researchers agree that the bearers of this culture spoke early Finno-Ugric languages. This was the first major linguistic shift in the region, as the Paleo-European languages of the first settlers began to be displaced or assimilated by arrivals from the east. Archaeologically, this is confirmed by changes in flint processing technology and the appearance of new types of dwellings. But the central theory linking archaeology to Sami ethnogenesis is the concept of asbestos ware, developed by the Finnish archaeologist Christian Karpelin. Asbestos ware is a unique type of pottery in which asbestos fibers, a mineral common in eastern Finland, particularly in the Lake Saimaa area, were added to the clay paste. Asbestos acted as a binding agent, allowing for the production of vessels with very thin walls, which were lightweight and extremely heat-resistant, ideal for mobile groups of hunters. Karpelin developed a detailed typology of this pottery, highlighting a key group he called Sarai-Sniemi II, which spread in northern Fennoscandia from 1500 BC right up to the beginning of the Common Era. Why is this important? Because Karpelin proposed considering the bearers of the asbestos ware culture as the direct ancestors of the Sami. He linked the early phases of this pottery with migratory impulses that brought the Proto-Sami language to the region. And here, as we can see, there is a divergence between Karpelin and Simonsen. After all, the latter spoke of physical, biological continuity, that the Sami are the same people who were there 10,000 years ago. But he did not take into account the complexity of linguistic and cultural processes pointed out by Karpelin. So the modern picture of the synthesis of ideas, in my view, looks like this. Representatives of the Komsa culture were neither Finns nor Sami in the modern sense. These were ancient hunters who spoke an unknown Paleo-European language. Then, around 1500 BC, bearers of an early Finno-Ugric language arrive in the territory of Fennoscandia, and it is during this period that a split occurs, when the southern group becomes the ancestors of the Finns, choosing agriculture and a settled way of life, and the northern group, having mixed with the descendants of the Komsa culture, preserves the hunting lifestyle, begins to make pottery with asbestos, and becomes the direct ancestors of the Sami. This is confirmed by a study published in Nature Communications in 2018. A group of geneticists, led by Theisias Lamnidis, analyzed the genomes of ancient people found on Bolshoi Oleni Island on the Kola Peninsula. The results showed that about 3,500 years ago, that is around 1500 BC, a clear Siberian component appears in the gene pool of the Fennoscandian population, which is absent in earlier hunter-gatherers of Scandinavia. This genetic flow is associated with the Y chromosome haplogroup N1C, which today is dominant among the Sami and Finns. This study brilliantly confirmed the linguistic theory about the arrival of Uralic languages from the east during this very period. Thus, the Finnish linguist of Sami origin Ante Aikio made a revolutionary contribution to understanding the linguistic history of the region. Analyzing the vocabulary of the Sami languages, he discovered a significant layer of words that have no etymology in Uralic languages. These are words relating to specific northern geography, flora, fauna, and survival technologies. For example, names of certain fish species, toponyms, and landscape terms. Aikio put forward the theory of a Paleo-European substrate, in which he argues that before the arrival of Uralic language speakers, Fennoscandia was inhabited by a population that spoke languages currently unknown, possibly the descendants of those very Mesolithic representatives of the Komsa culture. Aikio calls this extinct language Paleo-Laplandic. According to this theory, the Sami formed as an ethnicity as a result of the merger of two streams: the Uralic newcomers, who gave the linguistic structure, and the Paleo-European Aborigines, who gave a significant part of the genetics and adaptive skills. Aikio dates this process to the early Metal Age, around 1500 BC. Other linguists, such as Mikko Korhonen and Pekka Samalahti, agree with him, noting this very time frame as the period of separation of the Proto-Sami language from the Finno-Sami community, when the ancestors of the Finns remained in the Gulf of Finland area under the strong influence of Baltic and Germanic cultures. And the ancestors of the Sami, that is, the speakers of Proto-Sami, moved further north into the depths. The question of the existence of states or proto-states among the Sami before the Common Era is a subject of frequent speculation, but the scientific answer to it is quite unambiguous: no. Studies of the social structure of the ancient Sami, in particular the analysis of the distribution of dwellings and hunting grounds, show that before the Common Era, the Sami did not have states, proto-states, or the institution of hereditary chiefs, in the classical sense of the word. The main units of society were the family as the basic economic unit, and the Sida, a territorial community that united several families, usually 10-30 people, although larger groups could gather in winter. The Sida held collective rights to hunting grounds and waters. Power in the Sida belonged to a council of elders and authoritative leaders whose status was based on personal skills, not coercion or heredity. So we can assume that this was a classical egalitarian society. Moreover, archaeology does not record signs of property stratification characteristic of proto-states, for example, rich burials of the elite as opposed to the poor. And so, it was right up to the Middle Ages. Why did this happen? Knut Odner put forward an interesting theory. The Sami consciously refused hierarchy. Observing neighboring Germanic tribes with their chiefs, taxes, and conflicts, the ancestors of the Sami chose a different survival strategy: flexibility, mobility, and equality. It is also a common mistake to consider that the ancient Sami were always reindeer herders, nomads with large herds, which, by the way, could have promoted property inequality. Archaeology categorically refutes this if we are speaking about the period before the Common Era. Björnar Olsen and Inger Estmo prove that the economy was based on hunting and fishing, and reindeer domestication during this period was of a very limited nature. Large-scale pastoral reindeer herding emerged much later, in the 15th to the 17th centuries. And that is precisely why the basis for the emergence of a complex political superstructure, with its control over herds and wars for pastures, simply did not exist in the prehistoric period. If we speak about the spiritual world, then here we must pay attention to the complex of rock paintings in Alta, which dates from the period from 4200 to 500 BC. Knut Helskog, who devoted decades to studying these images, developed the shore connection theory. Helskog noticed that the drawings were always located on rocks that descended directly into the water. He interprets the shoreline as a liminal zone, a border between the world of humans, the world of spirits, and the sky. The subjects of the drawings, herds of reindeer, bear hunting, halibut fishing, shamanic rituals, boats, were not simply scenes of everyday life. Helskog proves that these were ritual communications with guardian spirits to ensure luck and restore world harmony. The evolution of style from naturalistic to schematic reflects changes in religious beliefs, which subsequently formed the basis of the Sami religion known from ethnography. The bear occupied a special place in spiritual culture. Carl Martin Edsman, studying circumpolar traditions, showed that the Sami bear ritual has deep common roots, with Siberian peoples such as the Khanty and Mansi. The bear was considered a sacred being, a mediator between gods and humans. Hunting it was a sacred act, accompanied by complex rituals of purification and reconciliation with the spirit of the killed beast. Inger Zachrisson investigated bear graves, burials of bear bones arranged in anatomical order. And although most finds date to a later time, the origins of this tradition, for example, depictions of hunting scenes on the rocks of Alta, may reach back to times before the Common Era. And this testifies to the stability of the religious beliefs of the Proto-Sami over millennia. Summing up, we can say that the Sami are most likely descendants of both primitive European hunters from the Komsa culture and Eastern migrants who brought the Uralic language and Siberian genetics in the Bronze Age. Their language formed as a result of the superposition of a Finno-Ugric base onto a powerful Paleo-European substrate. absorbing the vocabulary of the vanished Aboriginal population. The Sami did not create states or proto-states before the Common Era. Their strength was the egalitarian Sita system, which allowed for efficient resource management without creating a repressive hierarchy. Perhaps that is exactly why they managed not to fight, but to coexist with the Germanic South. Friends, thank you for watching this video to the end. It turned out to be quite complex, but whoever watched it through is a real champ. Like, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for your attention.